Welcome to another episode of Conversations. My next guest describes himself as a blue Anon destroyer. What could that possibly mean? Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. This is the show where I get to talk about anything and everything that's on my mind. And today I have an interesting young man, Kangmin Lee. And I'm going to read a little bit about his background, but he's a Korean Christian conservative, a speaker, a commentator. He's a young man that is working with conservative groups like Turning Point USA, PragerU, various groups. He works with Students for Life, the Freedom Center, Live Action, and he's very young. And I love young people. And so help me to welcome Kangmin Lee to Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited, Kangmin, that you are a conservative activist and you're out there as a Korean American, really telling people and demonstrating what conservatism is really about. We often hear that, young people are liberals, they're progressives, they don't have conservative values, but that's not true of you.
Yeah, not at all. And it's kind of disheartening because when we think about Gen Z and millennials, and especially Asians who are in my generation, 86% of Asians aged 18 to 29 voted for Biden this past election. And so I am a minority and I'm also Korean. So we only make a 0.6% of the population here in America. So I'm a minority of a minority. And then on top of that, I'm conservative. So I'm really a minority within, the Korean community as well. So definitely it is challenging because I've lost nearly all my friends from college and high school. A lot of my Korean friends hate me now. Say really, really nasty things to me, like I'm licking the boot of the white man.
Well, let me ask you this. It's so interesting to me because Asians, especially Korean, Chinese, Japanese, they tend to be the most successful, I believe, of the Asian groups. And Asians who are successful and high achieving, they're all being discriminated against by the progressive left at elite institutions. They are victims of discrimination. So how in the world could they be progressive? Why wouldn't they be standing up first for their own civil rights, but also for just conservative values?
Yeah, I think when you think about immigrants, they are largely and very, very conservative, especially very, very socially conservative. They value conservative Western ideals like the nuclear family, discipline, meritocracy, education, and things like that. But the unfortunate reality is that we have a huge language barrier between second generation and first generation Asians. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, if you go to see a lot of Korean families, Chinese families, Japanese families, or just a lot of Asian families in general, their parents would speak to their kids in their native tongue, but their kids would speak back to them in English. And then so they're not able to instill those values as well because they can't have those deep theological, political, philosophical conversations with their children. And then on top of that, most Asian parents send their kids to public school, where we know today that
Right.
public schools are run by the left, and so they're indoctrinated. They're being taught all these racial, gender crazy ideologies, and then they come home, and then their parents are like, "Hey, no, I don't believe in that," but then they're not able to have complex in-depth conversations because there's a language barrier there. And then on top of that, a lot of Asian immigrants come here, they work so hard and they work their butt off so that their children would have a better future, would be able to go to better schools. But then unfortunately, they're indoctrinated in their public school system. And then when they do go to college, they are indoctrinated there as well to embrace un-American, terrible ideas like critical race theory and race essentialism.
Now, Kangman, did you go to a public school and then where did you go to college?
Yeah, so I did grow up in the public school, system all my whole life, and then I did go to a private elite institution. I went to
Okay.
USC out in Southern California. Better than UCLA. I like to say we have a friendly rivalry there, but I did go to college in LA,
Okay.
and I did grow up in the public school system.
Now, wait a minute. How is it that you escaped the indoctrination, or did you really escape it? Like, how did you become a Korean American conservative Christian?
I think I attribute a lot of it to my mother. So my mom raised us with a lot of discipline. So then, for example, growing up, I can only play video games for 1 hour on Saturday every week. And I saw all my other friends, they just played games every single day for hours on end. My mom was like, she really disciplined us. And,
Oh, was she
when I,
Tiger Mom? Was she a Tiger Mom?
oh, absolutely. It was crazy, and even when I would whine a little bit, complain a little bit, she would come out and say no and make me hold my hands up, and the very traditional, Asian discipline. And I learned to value not only honoring my parents but also self-control and discipline. And then on top of that, she instilled good values in me to study hard, work hard, and at home, I only spoke Korean. So then I'm able to have these complex conversations. I've had tons of conversations with my parents about theology, political philosophy, and all these things. And so I was able to do that. But growing up, I was still pretty much very indoctrinated. And at school, when I went to college at USC, LA, very, very liberal, very left leaning. And so my school administration, my professors, my classmates, my peers, they all parroted the same leftist ideological points. And so I believed that because for me, I was kind of in a bubble. And so I was like, okay, yeah, like, President 45, Trump, he was a racist. He was a terrible person. Oh, the only conservatives in this country are white, redneck, gun-toting people back in the boonies of, Wisconsin or something. Like they're just terrible, racist, misogynistic people.
You
And
believe
then
that?
I did. And I believed that socialism was good. I believed that we should get rid of the Second Amendment and all these very liberal talking points. But I grew up in the church. So as a devout Christian, I thought that, I could reconcile these things, but I just didn't really understand them too well. And then I started to watch PragerU videos and I started to realize the lies surrounding President Trump. And I saw I just started to watch a lot of people's videos like Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder. And then I realized in fall of 2019, so it was very recent, that conservatism is aligned with and is compatible with Christian values. When you think about God's design for the family, and when you think about conservative values and traditional values, all these things really stem from Christian values. And what I like to say, and there's a lot of debate on what conservatism really is, but I think as a basis, I really do believe that conservatism is the application of
Right.
Christian morals to politics. Because when we look at a lot of the great ideals of America, e pluribus unum, imago Dei, a lot of our ideals of freedom, they all come from the word of God, and they come from Christian ideals of freedom, where again,
Right.
even the American idea of freedom, even the founding fathers, they believed in the biblical view of freedom, where it's not licentiousness. It's not just doing whatever you want to do, but it's doing what you ought to do.
Well, when we return, I want to talk with you about how you discovered those PragerU videos, because I've been contacted in the past from students. A student in particular from LA was told by a teacher, whatever you do, don't watch those PragerU videos. And she stumbled across, she contacted me because she stumbled across one of my videos. But it seems to me that we need more teachers telling people whatever they do, don't watch PragerU, because human nature means you do the opposite. And we're going to take a break. And when we return, more about you and your fascinating journey.
Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain is made possible by Cooper Steel, a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee.
Cooper Steel believes in sponsoring Carol Swain because we believe as she does, you build strong, you stand strong.
What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles, Cooper Steel is committed to excellence, responsibility, and community. Cooper Steel's motto is build strong, stand strong. They treat their employees and customers like family. Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Learn more about our generous sponsor at coopersteel.com. Black Eye for America is enlightening the nation.
I would definitely encourage people to buy the book to learn a little bit more about what critical race theory is actually rooted in, Marxism.
Buy the book at bethepeoplenews.com or wherever books are sold.
Just so we can have logical and practical conversations with people who are getting misinformation and disinformation from social media, from their friends.
Now an Amazon bestseller and available on Kindle.
Absolutely. It's a must-read book.
I'm back with my guest, Kangmin Lee, and he's a Korean American Christian activist. How did you encounter the PragerU videos? That's one thing. And then what does it mean to be a blue Anon destroyer? And so I'd like answers to both of those questions.
Yeah, so when I first started to realize the merits of conservatism and why that is the political philosophy of modern day American conservatism is the answer to a lot of the problems we see today from a political standpoint. PragerU started to pop up on my YouTube algorithm and my front page. And I was like, oh, interesting. Let me see. They're 5 minutes and I just don't really know too much about these topics. And I started to watch them and I was like, wow, these are actually really good. Like they're factual and they make a lot of sense. For example, I don't think we should be judging people based on the content, based on their skin color, but by the content of their character. And I was like, wow, why are we saying the opposite today where, you are destined to a certain destiny. You are beholden to a certain destiny by nature of your skin color. I was like, okay, what is going on? PragerU is making really good points. And then it's really funny that you mentioned in the previous segment about how professors told students not to watch PragerU videos. I remember I was telling a friend, I was like, hey, there's this organization called PragerU and they make really cool videos. And they said, don't watch it. It's a white supremacist think tank. And I was like, but they literally said not to judge people based on the color of their skin. What do you mean it's white supremacist? And I was like, this is absurd. And so I started to watch more. And then I started to stumble across your videos as well, which was very influential about the past of the Democratic Party. And I didn't realize that they have such a boggled past and they are the party of slavery, Jim Crow, KKK, right? And so that's how I stumbled upon PragerU. And then in terms of Blue Anon Destroyer, Blue Anon is kind of like a meme where it's making fun of the left, where a lot of people talk about QAnon. It's like, oh, far right conspiracy.
Right.
But when you think about like a lot of what's happening in our society today, there are so many left-wing conspiracy theories. And so that's what Blue Anon comes from. It's just like blue Democrat and then so Blue Anon conspiracies. And so for me, as a Blue Anon destroyer, I try to destroy those narratives around police brutality, around white privilege, around gender theory, and all these crazy conspiracy theories that they craft for power, control, and money.
Well, it's very clever for you to adopt that. And I think that a lot of the turmoil that's taken place, it's clearly the case that it's driven by progressives. And we find that, the Democratic Party and the progressives associated with it, they have always loved segregation. They have always felt that racial and ethnic minorities were inferior. And as a consequence, if you really think about critical race theory, with the arguments that white people, that they have this property investment in their skin color, that they are really supreme over other groups, that they have to liberate other groups. It's the same old white supremacy argument. And when they replace equal opportunity with equity and force equal outcomes by lowering the standards or elevating people that don't come close to the standards, that is racism. And when they resegregate, minorities in our colleges as well as the other schools, we know that the segregation, which was outlawed by the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and other civil rights laws, that this is just the same old, same old. The Democratic Party, where the progressives tend to live, they're pushing the same agenda that they've always pushed. And they've always believed that minorities were inferior. They believe that they're the white man's burden.
Yeah, absolutely. I think nothing really has changed. And that's the sad reality of it. It's just that they've rebranded it under the guise of anti-racism. And it's like, it's so ridiculous to me that to be an anti-racist, you have to discriminate against racial groups who are privileged. So that's Ibram X. Kendi and a lot of Kimberly Crenshaw and a lot of these critical race theorists assertion where we have to racially discriminate to get today to right the wrongs of racial discriminations in the past. But the thing is, their benchmark to judge discrimination is disparities. But by that logic, Asians do, especially East and South Asians, do so much better than white households in this family in terms of income, success. And so by that logic, by their logic, white people need to discriminate against Asians in order to find some sort of racial equity because
that's what they're doing.
Racism.
They are discriminating against Asians. They are discriminating against Asians. And we have civil rights laws and we have a constitution with an equal protection clause. And the political left, they need to be held accountable because what they're doing is un-American. In America, we don't shame and bully people because of the color of their skin. And we have laws on the books that ban discrimination on account of race, sex, and national origin. And they need to be held accountable for what they're doing openly. Absolutely. They're doing it openly in defiance of the law.
Yeah, so it is a bit disheartening for sure when you think about, okay, they are in clear violation of the law, but then those enforcing these federal laws are ideologues. They're not people who care about the interests of the American people. They are ideologues. And when you think about the Democrats in control today, they're complete ideologues who just want to advance their agenda and shove it down our throat, especially even if it comes at the cost of, a crazy chasm between the American people, dividing people between races. And then now this year, it's gotten really bad where they're trying to divide people based on medical status, which is absolutely absurd.
Oh, I know.
And so that's what the Democrats have always done. They've always been the party of segregation. They've always weaponized and used coercion, extortion, and even violence to get and achieve their political goals. And it's really scary to think about today, but I think this is why it's more so important today for Christians and conservatives to stand up for American values, because if we don't stand up, I don't even know if we'll have a country anymore.
I agree with you 100%. And we also should point out that there are plenty of people in the Democratic Party that are just like us. They share our values. It's the leaders, the progressive leaders that are steeped in Marxism and socialism. Many of them do hate America. And so they're using racial and ethnic minorities, in the case of Blacks, the suffering of groups, to advance a political agenda. And then with the Asians, they're brainwashing young Asians. And I think that the success that Asians have had historically because of the values of their parents, as they become more aligned with the Democratic Party, it's not clear that second and third and fourth generation Asians will be as successful because the values that are being put out there are not values that are conducive to success.
Absolutely. And this is what, like you mentioned, these leaders, radical leftists and progressives who are bulldozing and really taking over the Democrat Party, they do hate this country, and that's why they're trying to divide us, make sure that Americans judge each other based on the color of their skin, not by the content of their character, their sex, national origin. And so it is really sad to see, but I really do believe in a race-blind society and America where we love each other because we're Americans first.
Well, Kangmin, we're going to take another break. And when we return, I want you to talk about the groups that you're involved in. It'll be our last segment. So want to make sure that people know how they can contact you and all of that good stuff. So we'll be back after this word from our sponsor.
Dr. Carol Swain's Be the People, a call to reclaim America's faith and promise, newly released in paperback and audio with a new introduction, is a challenge to all Americans. If you are serious about being the best citizen you can be, this is the book for you. From addressing moral relativism to reclaiming the future, you'll understand why Dr. Swain is one of the most relevant voices in today's culture war. Are you ready to reclaim America's faith and promise? Purchase at bethepeoplenews.com/books or wherever books are sold. Cooper Steel is a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee. What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel's motto is, "Build strong, stand strong." Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain.
I'm back with my guest, Kangmin Lee, a young Korean American that is making things happen. Tell us about some of the groups that you are involved with. And I know that you really have become quite the conservative activist at a time when our nation is in crisis.
Yeah, so I work with a lot of different organizations, but my first entrance into the conservative sphere was Turning Point. I went to their Student Action Summit back in December, and back then, a year ago, I didn't have this platform. No one knew who I was. But then I went there and I started to connect with other activists and other influencers and other people just who are conservative and like-minded. And that's kind of like where I got my starting point. And I started to grow my platform, and then I started to connect with PragerU. And then especially because, I really do believe that abortion is the greatest and most urgent human rights crisis in this country. Everyone talks about COVID. Everyone talks about all these other genocides, but literally every single year, over 1 million babies are killed, mutilated, brutally slaughtered in the womb every single year in this country, 2,363 every day. That is literally the number one cause of death, over heart disease, over cancer, over car accidents. And when
over COVID.
Over COVID. And when I think about how terrible this is, not only are we killing innocent lives, but the most vulnerable. Yes. And, God has really placed this on my heart because God really hates the shedding of innocent blood, and he values children. When you look at Matthew 18, Jesus is very serious about how we treat our children. He says it is better to tie a millstone around your neck and drown if you cause any of these little ones to stumble. And so God's heart is really big for children and babies. And for me, God has really put that on my heart as one of the biggest priorities. So I work a lot with Live Action and Students for Life as ambassadors for them to really promote the pro-life cause in order to abolish abortion and remind women and tell and get the message out to women that abortion is not worth it. Not only is it traumatic, but it is a lie. You will suffer after you being post-abortive, because the idea is that they tell you, oh, it's woman empowerment to kill your baby in the womb, but it is not. And it's so traumatic for not only the mother but the father. And so telling these women, hey, abortion is not worth it. You deserve better. There's so many more resources out there other than Planned Parenthood, which is literally just a baby killing machine. There's so many more resources out there, pregnancy centers, religious groups. We're all here to help you because we want you to succeed, but we also want you to know the value of life. And we always know that it is so worth it to give birth and to love your child.
Right. And there are also organizations and ministries that help women who have made the decision to have an abortion. And one of the problems I've always had with abortion is that they don't give young women informed consent. They don't tell them that they may be sterilized and never able to bear a live child when they're married or later in life when they want a child. nor do they tell them that they are more likely to suffer from depression and a host of other conditions. And so it is harmful to the women. They're not getting informed consent before they make that choice. But if you are a woman out there and you have had an abortion, and a large percentage of women in America have had abortions, I've had an abortion as a young woman. And for me, it was legal. I was young. And I did not realize that just because the government allows something, that doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it morally right. But as a Christian, I knew that when I confessed my sin, which abortion is sin, and no matter how you cut it, it is murder, that Jesus shed blood on the cross, covered me. And so I don't live my life in shame or guilt for something that I did, 40 years ago. But I just want women to know that if you have had an abortion, you don't have to beat yourself up. There is redemption. God loves you. And that is, you don't have to call yourself even post-abortive, because I think that once, you're cleansed by the blood of Jesus, you're free. And I'm saying, what I can say as a woman, who's been through it, but I also know that there's a lot of help for women that have made that choice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And getting back to some of the things that you're doing, I understand you're based in Atlanta. And when you talk about your pro-life passion with other Asians your age, how do they respond? Can they agree with you at least on the life issue?
They don't. And that's kind of the unfortunate reality of it. So you saw a lot of evangelical leaders and Christian leaders and faith leaders this past year equate Donald Trump's mean tweets and his past with, fornication, with murdering babies. They're like, oh, murdering babies is bad. But, he's kind of rude on Twitter. So that's also something to consider. And we should vote. I was like, what? Like, how can you, all sin is sin, but the consequences and severity of sins are so different. There's a difference between when someone murders someone than if someone is rude. And so it was really frustrating to me, and so many Asians, because a lot of Asians, this is kind of like typical of Asian culture, very tribalist, very collectivist, but values security and safety over freedom. And that's why so many countries communist China, Cambodia, Vietnam, you think about North Korea, a lot of them were able to buy into the lies of communism because they're like, hey, I'm just going to do what the authorities tell me and not question it at all, because they probably have the best interest. And this is for the common good. This is for the best for everyone. And they completely strip individuality from that. But in that same regard, today, the dominating narrative and dominant culture today tells them that it is empowerment to murder your baby in the womb. It is empowerment to embrace abortion and be pro-choice. This is women's rights, reproductive rights. And so Asians looking at that, especially even Asian Christians, they're like, yeah, I mean, it looks kind of wrong, but if everyone else is saying it, I think it's just best to stay in my little bubble, stay in my comfort, and not speak out for the murder and genocide of babies.
Now, just in the few seconds that we have left, could you tell our viewers how they can find out more about you?
Yeah, so I'm on all social media platforms, mainly on Instagram, Twitter. My handle is the Kangmin Lee. Instagram is shadow banning me right now, so you can't find me if you look up my name. You have to look up my full username, the Kangmin Lee. But yeah, and I also have a show. I haven't been able to do too much recently because I've been busy, but I also have a show on YouTube. You can just look up my name. You'll be able to find me.
I thank you so much for appearing on my show. I wish you well, and you are an example of the kind of young people that will change America. You will save a lot of lives, and God has clearly called you, positioned you, given you a platform, and so I wish you well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's really been an honor and pleasure.
Well, we're going to go to break, and we'll be back after another word from our sponsors. Many ask, why should I care about critical race theory? I'm Dr. Carol Swain, and along with Dr. Christopher Shore, we've authored a new book,
Black Eye for America, how critical race theory is burning down the house. Every American should care about CRT because this radical Marxist philosophy is dividing our country and taught to our children. But we're going to stop it. Endorsed by Dr. Ben Carson, Black Eye for America is a playbook on combating CRT.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Conversations. Kangmin Lee is just one of many young conservatives that will be part of the solution for America. So when you hear all these distressing things about young people, they've all lost their minds, that they have no conservative values, those people who watch Conversations on a regular basis know that there are plenty of young people from different races and ethnicities who are conservative, who do have compassion, who love God. And I think we should be encouraged by that. I hope to see you again next week for another episode of Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain, the show where I get to select the guests.